He was taken into custody in Rockford?
Sure. This case is a great example of partnerships. So our partners with Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, federal agents, took him into custody very close to his place of employment.
In the middle of the night, while two young children slept just feet away, a husband and wife were shot again and again inside their own bedroom. Now, for the first time, the autopsy reports are out, and they reveal just how brutal those final moments were. Spencer Tepee was shot 7 times. Monnique Tepee was shot 9 times. Multiple gunshot wounds, close range, inside their home. Investigators say this was not random. They believe this was personal. The man now in custody is Monnique's ex-husband, a trained vascular surgeon, accused of stalking the couple, watching their home, and returning in the early hours of December 30th to carry out the killings. No forced entry, no warning, no mercy. As new forensic details emerge, investigators are piecing together a chilling picture of obsession, planning, and violence, all unfolding while the couple's children remained inside the house. Tonight, we break down what the autopsies reveal, how police believe this crime was carried out, and the evidence now tying Michael McKe to the murders of Spencer and Monnique Tepee. This is a case that keeps getting darker. The morning of December 30th began like any other weekday in suburban Ohio. It was cold, quiet, ordinary. But by mid-morning, something was clearly wrong. Spencer Tepee, a dentist known by colleagues as reliable and dedicated, never arrived at work. For someone who rarely missed a day, the silence was alarming. Calls went unanswered, messages weren't returned, and when coworkers tried reaching his wife, Monnique, there was no response from her either. By late morning, concern turned into urgency. Just after 10 a.m., a friend went to the Tepee home. What they found inside would shatter multiple families and leave investigators staring at one of the most disturbing domestic homicide cases Ohio has seen in years. Spencer and Monnique Tepee were found dead in their second-floor bedroom. Both had been shot multiple times. Their 2 children, just 4 years old and 1-year-old, were inside the house, alive, unharmed, sleeping through the violence that ended their parents' lives. The autopsies now confirm the brutality of what happened in that bedroom. Spencer was shot 7 times. Monnique was shot 9 times. These were not random shots, not panicked, not accidental. The wounds were spread across their heads, torsos, arms, and hands, suggesting movement, struggle, and sustained gunfire at close range. Investigators believe the killings happened sometime between 2 and 5 in the morning, while the house was still and dark. Neighbors heard nothing. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken doors, no smashed windows. Whoever entered that home did so quietly and with purpose. As detectives began processing the scene, one fact quickly shifted the direction of the investigation. This was not a robbery. Nothing appeared ransacked. There was no sign of theft. The attack was contained to the bedroom. The children were left untouched, and the violence was excessive. This wasn't about opportunity. It was about intent. Attention soon turned to Monnique's past, specifically a marriage that had ended years earlier, but according to investigators, may never have truly ended in the mind of one man. Michael McKe, a 39-year-old vascular surgeon, highly educated, professionally accomplished, and Monnique's ex-husband. Their marriage lasted from 2015 to 2017. On paper, the divorce appeared uneventful. It was finalized quickly. Assets were divided. The reason listed was incompatibility. To the outside world, it looked like a chapter closed, but detectives would soon learn that behind the paperwork were allegations far darker. Friends and family of Monnique told investigators that McKe had been emotionally abusive during the marriage, that he made threats, that she was afraid of him, even years after the divorce. One witness told police that Monnique had confided allegations of forced sex and strangulation. Another said McKe had told her he could kill her anytime he wanted, that he would always find her, that she would always be his wife. Chilling words, especially in hindsight. And then came a discovery that would change everything. On December 6th, more than 2 weeks before the murders, Monnique and Spencer traveled to Indianapolis to attend the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State was playing Indiana, and the couple had gone with friends. While they were out of town, investigators say Michael McKe was in Columbus, at their home. According to newly unsealed court documents, surveillance footage shows McKe entering the area surrounding the Tepee house, the curtilage, and remaining there for hours. He wasn't supposed to be there. Monnique left the football game early that night. Friends later told police she was upset over something involving her ex-husband. What exactly she knew or suspected remains unclear, but investigators believe that December 6th visit was not random. They believe it was reconnaissance. In the days following the murders, police released a grainy video showing a person of interest walking near the Tepee home in the early morning hours. The figure wore dark clothing and moved with a distinctive gait. That man, police now say, was Michael McKe. Detectives tracked a silver SUV seen arriving near the home shortly before the estimated time of the killings and leaving shortly after. The vehicle had distinctive features. It was later linked to McKe. Even more troubling, police say the SUV had been fitted with stolen license plates from multiple states, Ohio and Arizona, which were swapped or removed. When the vehicle was seized, investigators noted scrape marks where a temporary tag had been hastily peeled away. Then there was McKe's phone. During the exact window of the murders, his phone showed no activity for 17 hours. It wasn't lost. It wasn't dead. Police say it had been deliberately left behind, likely to avoid location tracking. When McKe was arrested on January 9th in Illinois, he waived extradition without protest. Jail intake footage shows him calm, composed, emotionless. Inside his Chicago apartment, police found multiple firearms, including one that investigators say has a preliminary forensic link to the crime scene. Ballistics testing is ongoing, but shell casings recovered from the Tepee home are already being compared. As the case continues to unfold, one question looms larger than all others. How did he get inside the house? There were no signs of forced entry, no alarms triggered, no neighbors alerted, which suggests familiarity, trust, or prior access, and that raises a terrifying possibility that the man accused of killing Spencer and Monnique Tepee had been watching them for far longer than anyone realized. This was not a crime of passion, it was a crime of preparation. The autopsy reports transformed suspicion into something far heavier. Until now, the public understood that Spencer and Monnique Tepee had been shot multiple times, but the details revealed in the medical examiner's findings paint a far more disturbing picture of what happened inside that bedroom in the early hours of December 30th. Spencer Tepee was shot 7 times. The bullets struck his head, neck, chest, back, and hand. One entered near his left ear. Another tore through the left side of his neck. 2 more penetrated his chest. One struck his upper back. Another hit his hand, suggesting a defensive movement, possibly an instinctive attempt to shield himself or reach for Monnique. This was not a single fatal shot. This was sustained gunfire at close range. Monnique's injuries were even more extensive. She was shot 9 times. 1 bullet entered her cheek. 3 struck her chest. Others hit her stomach, forearm, hand, and both biceps. The distribution of wounds suggests she was moving, perhaps turning, perhaps trying to escape, perhaps trying to protect her children in the next room. Forensic pathologists describe patterns like these as consistent with execution-style violence combined with pursuit. In other words, the shooter did not stop when 1 shot was enough. He continued, and that detail matters. In criminal court, the number, placement, and spread of gunshot wounds often speak louder than words. They help prosecutors argue intent, premeditation, and state of mind. 7 and 9 shots are not accidental. They are not impulsive. They are deliberate. Even more chilling is what investigators believe was used to commit the crime. According to court records, Michael McKe is accused of using a suppressor, commonly referred to as a silencer. Despite popular myths, suppressors do not make gunfire silent, but they significantly reduce the sharp crack that would normally alert neighbors, especially in the middle of the night behind closed doors, inside a second-floor bedroom. This detail may explain why no neighbors reported hearing gunshots, even though nearly 16 rounds were fired inside a residential home. Shell casings were recovered at the scene. At least 2 bullets were also recovered, either from the room or during autopsy. These items are now central to forensic testing. Ballistics experts compare microscopic markings left on shell casings and bullets, marks so unique they are often described as a firearm's fingerprint. If prosecutors can conclusively match those casings to a weapon recovered from McKe's apartment, it becomes one of the strongest forms of physical evidence available, and investigators believe they are close. When McKe's Chicago apartment was searched, police found multiple firearms. One weapon has already been described as having a preliminary link to the crime scene. That phrase matters. It means early testing suggests compatibility, but final confirmation is still pending. If confirmed, the weapon would place McKe not just near the crime, but directly behind the trigger. Then there is the timeline. The estimated time of death for both Spencer and Monnique is listed as 10:11 a.m. on December 30th, the time they were officially pronounced dead, but investigators believe the actual killings occurred much earlier, likely between 2:00 and 5 a.m. That window aligns with surveillance footage showing a vehicle arriving near the home in the middle of the night and leaving shortly after. It also aligns with the absence of phone activity. McKe's cell phone showed no movement for 17 hours during the critical window. Prosecutors believe the phone was intentionally left behind, likely at his workplace in Illinois, to avoid digital tracking. In modern homicide investigations, phones often betray suspects, Location pings, app usage, background data, all of it creates a trail. Leaving a phone behind can look like a calculated move, especially when combined with other acts of concealment, and there were many. Investigators say McKe's SUV had been fitted with stolen license plates from multiple states. The vehicle was allegedly seen with different tags at different times. When seized, fresh scrape marks suggested a temporary Arizona tag had been hastily removed. These are not the actions of someone acting on impulse. They are the actions of someone trying not to be seen. The December 6th surveillance now takes on even greater importance. Police believe McKe entered the area around the Tepee home while Spencer and Monnique were away at the Big Ten championship game. He stayed for hours. What he did during that time remains unclear, but investigators believe he was studying the house, learning entry points, learning routines, learning silence. That prior visit may explain the lack of forced entry on December 30th. It raises the possibility that McKe knew how to enter without breaking anything, or that he had previously tested access. And then there is behavior. When McKe was arrested, he did not resist. He did not ask questions. He waived extradition almost immediately. Jail intake footage shows him calm, compliant, expressionless. This demeanor has drawn attention. Veteran investigators describe such affect, flat, detached, unemotional, as sometimes consistent with individuals who compartmentalize violence. People capable of separating actions from emotion. That does not prove guilt, but in context, it adds to the psychological picture forming around the suspect. At this stage, Michael McKe has pleaded not guilty to all charges. He faces 4 counts of aggravated murder and 1 count of aggravated burglary. Each carries the possibility of life in prison. Prosecutors have described the case as domestic violence, despite the marriage ending years earlier, because of the alleged pattern of control, threats, and fixation. And still, one question refuses to go away. Why that night? Why December 30th? Why now? Investigators have not yet revealed what may have triggered the timing, whether it was something Monnique said, something McKe learned, or something he feared losing forever. But as evidence continues to surface, one thing becomes increasingly clear. This was not a sudden eruption of anger. It was the final act of a long, quiet obsession. By the time Michael McKe was arrested, investigators already believed the story of that night had been written long before December 30th. What remained was proving it. The case against McKe did not hinge on a single piece of evidence. It was built layer by layer: surveillance footage, vehicle movement, digital silence, forensic data, and witness statements, all converging toward the same conclusion. Police now say they believe they identified McKe as a primary person of interest very early in the investigation. Friends and family of Monnique told detectives almost immediately that her ex-husband was someone to look at closely. They described a relationship marked by control, fear, and lingering threats that never truly ended. That information alone was not enough to make an arrest, but it framed everything that followed. Then came the video. In the days after the murders, investigators released footage of a man walking behind the Tepee home in the early morning hours. He moved slowly, deliberately, dressed in dark clothing. What stood out was his gait, a distinctive way of walking that investigators later said matched Michael McKe. That figure was not wandering. He appeared to know exactly where he was going. Police tracked the path of that individual to a nearby vehicle. Surveillance cameras from surrounding areas showed a silver SUV arriving near the Tepee home shortly before the estimated time of the murders and leaving shortly afterward. That SUV would become one of the most important pieces of the case. License plate readers, traffic cameras, and private surveillance systems captured fragments of its journey. Investigators say the vehicle traveled from Illinois to Ohio and back again. Along the way, it appeared with different license plates, stolen plates, Ohio plates, Arizona plates, not registered to the vehicle. When the SUV was finally seized from a hospital parking lot in Rockford, Illinois, where McKe worked, investigators noticed something else: scrape marks on the rear window where a temporary tag had recently been removed, hastily, as if someone had realized it was time to erase a trail. Then there was the phone. In modern homicide investigations, cell phones are often the most reliable witnesses. They track location, movement, behavior, even sleep patterns. They don't forget, they don't lie, unless they're left behind. McKe's phone showed no activity for 17 hours during the window investigators believe the murders occurred. No movement, no pings, no data. Police believe this was intentional, a calculated attempt to create distance between himself and the crime scene. But silence can speak just as loudly as motion. Investigators compared McKe's usual phone usage to that day. Patterns matter. People rarely go completely dark without reason, especially professionals who typically stay connected. And while the phone didn't move, other things did. Vehicles moved, cameras captured, weapons fired. After McKee's arrest, investigators searched his apartment in Chicago. Inside, they found multiple firearms. One weapon immediately drew attention. Early testing suggested it could be linked to the shell casings recovered from the Tepee bedroom. Ballistics testing is meticulous. Casings are examined for microscopic markings left by the firing pin and ejector. Bullets are analyzed for rifling patterns inside the barrel. These marks are unique to each firearm. If confirmed, this evidence would place the weapon, and by extension, McKe, directly at the scene. Investigators also examined McKee's background more closely. He had once lived in Las Vegas, working for a surgical group. Court records show he was named in a malpractice lawsuit there, accused of failing to properly train an employee. When attorneys attempted to serve him legal papers, they couldn't find him. The surgical group reportedly told lawyers that McKe had vanished. He had provided a false address. This pattern, disappearing, changing locations, avoiding traceability, now appeared less like coincidence and more like habit. Back in Ohio, detectives revisited December 6th. That night, while Monnique and Spencer were cheering for Ohio State in Indianapolis, McKe was allegedly at their home in Columbus. Surveillance footage shows him entering the area around the house and leaving hours later. Friends told police Monnique left the game early, visibly upset over something involving her ex-husband. Investigators believe she may have sensed something was wrong. What she knew, and when, remains unclear, but that visit is now viewed as a turning point. Prosecutors believe it allowed McKe to confirm routines, test access points, and ensure the house could be entered quietly. That would explain the lack of forced entry. It would explain how someone could move through the home without alerting neighbors, and it would explain how the killer knew exactly where to go. The bedroom. The killings themselves show signs of planning, a suppressor to reduce noise, multiple shots fired with precision, the children left unharmed, no theft, no chaos beyond the bedroom. Everything suggests focus, purpose, control. When McKe appeared in court, he did not react. He did not speak. He stood motionless as charges were read. He later pleaded not guilty to all counts. 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of aggravated burglary, each carrying the possibility of life in prison. Investigators say they are still working to answer the final unanswered questions. How exactly McKe entered the home, whether he had a key, whether access had been compromised earlier, and what triggered the timing of the attack. But in many ways, the picture is already clear. This was not a crime committed in the heat of the moment. It was the result of fixation, of surveillance, of resentment that never faded. And now, as prosecutors prepare for trial, they are not just trying to prove that Michael McKe pulled the trigger, they are preparing to show a jury that long before the bullets were fired, the outcome had already been decided. As the case moves forward, the courtroom will become the final place where the story of Spencer and Monnique Tepee is told. Prosecutors are expected to argue that this was not simply a double homicide, but a calculated act of domestic violence rooted in control, obsession, and long-standing resentment. The evidence they plan to present is layered. Surveillance footage, vehicle tracking, ballistic analysis, digital records, and testimony from those who knew Monnique and feared for her safety long before her death. At the center of the prosecution's case is intent. 7 shots into Spencer, 9 shots into Monnique. Those numbers alone tell a story juries often understand instinctively. This was not a struggle that ended quickly. This was force applied again and again, even after death was certain. Prosecutors will likely describe it as overkill, violence that exceeds what is necessary to end a life and instead reflects rage, fixation, or punishment. They will also emphasize preparation, a suppressor allegedly used to reduce noise, a phone left behind to avoid tracking, stolen license plates swapped and removed, a prior visit to the home weeks earlier while the victims were away. Taken together, these details form a narrative not of panic, but of planning. The defense, meanwhile, is expected to challenge nearly every link in that chain. They may argue that circumstantial evidence is being stacked to look like certainty, that ballistics science is not absolute, that phone inactivity does not prove physical absence or presence, that surveillance footage shows a man, but not conclusively their client, that no eyewitness places Michael McKe inside the bedroom that night. They may question motive. The marriage ended years ago. Both parties moved on. Monnique had built a new life, a family, a future. Why now? Why wait nearly a decade? Those questions will be raised repeatedly, but prosecutors will counter with something more difficult to dismiss: behavior patterns, threats described by witnesses, allegations of control and violence, a fixation that did not fade with time, a man who allegedly watched, waited, and rehearsed. They will also remind jurors of what did not happen. Nothing was stolen. The children were not harmed. The violence was confined to the bedroom. This was personal. And then there are the children. 2 young lives spared physically, but forever altered. Children who slept through the final moments of their parents' lives. Children who will grow up without memories of the people who loved them most. that reality will hang over the courtroom like a shadow. Michael McKe has pleaded not guilty. He is presumed innocent under the law, and the burden of proof rests entirely on the state. But if convicted, he faces life in prison, possibly without the chance of release. There are still unanswered questions. Investigators have not disclosed exactly how entry was gained. They have not revealed whether additional evidence is still being analyzed. And they have not yet explained what, if anything, triggered the timing of the murders. Those answers may come at trial, or they may never come at all. What remains undeniable is this: Spencer and Monnique Tepee were living an ordinary life, a loving marriage, a home filled with children, plans for the future, and in the quiet hours before dawn, that life was violently erased. Justice, if it comes, will not bring them back. It will not undo the fear, the loss, or the questions that remain, but it may offer accountability, and it may ensure that the story of what happened inside that house is never forgotten. If you want more true crime stories like this, told with depth and clarity, make sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe for more.